Good morning to you. Welcome to your word of encouragement for today, your bite-sized word to meditate on. I have been looking at David and Goliath again, and the thing that sticks out the most for me in the story of David and Goliath is if we go to 1 Samuel 17, there's a lot of time spent here describing what Goliath looked like. He was big. He was 6 cubits and a span. That was his height, which actually is 9 feet 6 inches. So picture how tall he was. It describes his bronze helmet. He was armed with a coat of mail. You know, you see the coat of mail if you watch the old warrior movies. They wore the coat of mail, it's called. The weight of that coat was 5,000 shekels of bronze. He had bronze armor on his legs and a bronze javelin between his shoulders. His spear, it was so big, it weighed 600 shekels. He had to have a shield bearer going before him. So the whole thing here that sticks out for me is this: Goliath was tall. He was known as the champion of the Philistines. So he had a reputation, but it was his armor that is described so specifically that makes him sound, if you use your imagination, he sounds as if you can picture him looking like this very tall, big, threatening figure. So then we get to David in 1 Samuel 16, because this is where David is anointed as king. And now remember, all his brothers were brought before Samuel the prophet, and none of them were the one. Until Samuel said to Jesse the father, "Are all the young men here?" And he said, "There remains yet the youngest, and there he is keeping the sheep." It's in 1 Samuel 16, verse 11. It's like all the sons are here that the father thought would meet the standard of the one who would be anointed king. And Samuel the prophet comes along and he looks at all of them, and there's not one there there's no witness of the Spirit in Samuel to say, okay, this is the one. And then when he says to the father, he says, is this it? Are these the only ones you have? And even the father says, no, there is another one down there. He's out there looking after the sheep. And that's when Samuel said, go and fetch him, send and bring him, for we will not sit down till he comes here. So when David arrived, this is all, the only description we have of David here. He was ruddy with bright eyes and good looking. And it was then that the Lord said to Samuel, arise, anoint him, for this is the one. So here we see the enemy, because we know David defeated Goliath, but here we see the big description of Goliath, that intimidating giant, and then we see David, who is ruddy, good looking, bright eyes. Like, if that is the qualification that people need to say, okay, you're the one, you have an anointing, you're going to be king one day, then a lot of people will be able to tick those boxes. But then in verse 13, here's the key. Then Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the midst of his brothers, and the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. So the key here is he doesn't look the part, because it says in verse 7 here, before David was anointed king, but the Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance, when they thought it was Eliab. The Lord said to Samuel, do not look at his appearance or at his physical stature, because I have refused him. He's not the one. That's it. For the Lord does not see as man sees, for man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. So the heart to God, to me, in this story here, because remember, David was the one who was looking after the sheep. It was in that place that David learned the power of God, the protection of God. It was in that place of hiding where the significant things happened for David. And that's why God could say, I look at the heart. There's a man here It's not those who look the part. It's the one whose heart has been fully yielded to me. Even though he's doing something that seems so insignificant, he's there in the background looking after the sheep. Nobody thinks he's important. And so I want to say to you this morning that you might be looking at your own life, looking at the outward appearance, the things that people see on the outside, but God's looking at the heart. So do we have a heart that pursues the ways of God? Have we dealt with those things in our lives where we feel forgotten and disappointed and rejected and isolated and waiting too long? Where those things in our lives, those circumstances in our lives can cause us to become hard-hearted because we think we've been refused by God or rejected by God. And the enemy would like to say that. But you know what happened? Because David understood this, even when he was anointed and the Spirit of the Lord came upon him from that day, he still had to go back to the sheep, where the sheep were. Because on the day that Goliath appeared, that's where David was, until he was sent by his father to take food to his brothers who were ready for battle, but they were afraid of the giant. And so because David had a heart after the things of God, he could say to Goliath, I come to you in the name of the Lord, and he knew God was with him. And so when our hearts are turned towards the things of God and we say, God, I only want to please you. I believe what your word says. We know that God is with us and we can face any intimidation. So that's my encouragement for you today. Have a great day today.